Hi, my name is Elizabeth Spinney. I'm the Invasive Plant Coordinator for Vermont Forest Parks and Recreation. I work with communities, organizations, and even with other state agencies to provide information about the impact of invasive terrestrial plants and connect those people to resources to take action. I'm honored to have the chance to talk to you about invasive plants and some common species to be looking for in your Vermont backyard woods. Plan to walk away from this presentation with resources to feel comfortable identifying these species and information on the noxious weed status of these species in the region. There will be additional links to learning resources for each of these species at the end of the presentation. Before moving forward, I want to make sure we are all on the same page. This is what I mean when I use the term invasive in reference to a plant. First, the plant is not native to where you found it, meaning it did not evolve in that ecosystem. Not being native to that place, it does not have typical checks and balances like predators, competitors, or disease. Critically, to make a plant invasive versus exotic, it causes some kind of harm to economics, human health, or to wildlife or natural areas. Alright, so I have to inject some positive points. So here are some photographs of spring wildflowers we'll all get to see in the upcoming weeks. They are a great example of something Vermonters value. However, they are negatively impacted by the presence of invasive plants in the woods. Whether deep woods or on the edges, invasive plants are a threat to the forest, reducing biodiversity, outcompeting native species, and potentially leading to lost revenue in altered natural communities. Here is an example of an invasive plant population, Japanese barberry, in Antrim, New Hampshire. I've seen infestations like this in rich woods areas in Vermont, and you can imagine the impact of all that low green barberry, lacking growth of those spring ephemerals. If this were a woodlot or sugar bush, it would block regeneration of forest tree species. I want to pose a question. Are invasive plants evil? It can be easy to anthropomorphize a perceived enemy and forget that invasive plants themselves aren't evil, but rather a tree, shrub, grass, vine, or herb in the wrong place. And often they've gotten to that wrong place because of humans. The good news is many of these species start out as ornamental, which is a pathway under our control. We now have the chance to become informed about the species we plant and use that as an opportunity to slow the spread of invasive plants and stop the introduction of any new invasive species. So for each of these species, I'll give background, ID clues, and control techniques. One measure I will be referencing is the New York Invasiveness Ranking. This system was created by the Nature Conservancy, Brooklyn Botanic Garden, and adopted by the New York State Invasive Species Council and the Invasive Species Advisory Committee. Each of the species I am going to mention today are either listed as a noxious weed in Vermont and possibly by one of our neighbors. They were chosen as a cross-section of the many common invasive plant species in Vermont. And when I say prohibited, that means they are illegal to buy, sell, or transport. A great place to start is to learn to ID some of the more common invasive plants in Vermont, so that when you are out at sites in your community, you can have a search image for what to look for. We can't manage invasive plants if we don't know what's where. This site in the Gallery of Invaders is a great place to start. And today I'll walk you through the ID and control of some of the more common backyard woods species. Our first species is common buckthorn. The native range is Europe and Asia. The species came to North America from Europe in the 1700s for things like hedgerows and boundary marking, and later on even for wildlife cover. It is a deciduous shrub or small tree with other common names like European buckthorn and Carolina buckthorn. The scientific name, Rhamnus cathartica, hints at one threat it poses. Focus on cathartic, When wildlife eat this plant's berries, it causes rapid digestion, a purge of sorts, which causes stress on the wildlife and leaves the seeds of this plant in a new place with plenty of fertilizer. Its habitat is forest, forest edges, and disturbed habitat. The biggest threat this species poses is from forming dense, even-aged patches that exclude other plants and outcompete native plants, and they can even change the soil chemistry, increasing the amount of nitrogen in the soil, limiting what other plants can grow in that area even further. We have another buckthorn in Vermont called Glossy or false buckthorn. The native range is Europe and Asia. It is a deciduous shrub to small tree, and Glossy is a false buckthorn, so it's closely related to the common buckthorn, but the leaves tend towards alternate. It arrived from Europe before 1800. Its habitat is forest, forest edges, fields, swamps, disturbed habitat. The threat of this species is that it thrives in the forest understory. It is shade tolerant, wildlife dispersed, and poses many of the same threats as common buckthorn. For common buckthorn, the New York invasiveness ranking is very high. For our neighbors, it is prohibited in Vermont, New York, New Hampshire, and Massachusetts, and again that means it's illegal to buy, sell, or transport this plant or any part of this plant. USDA estimates it could occur in zones 3 to 7. If you look at the zone map in the bottom right corner, the purples are 3 to 4, blues 5, greens 6 to 7, and yellows at the very bottom 8 to 9. For glossy buckthorn, the invasiveness ranking is high, and it is prohibited in Vermont, New York, New Hampshire, and Massachusetts. Its growing zones are 3 to 7, and again, on the map, the purples are 3 to 4, blues 5, greens 6 to 7, and yellows 8 to 9. For common buckthorn, this plant can reach heights of 22 feet with a 10-inch diameter trunk and a spreading and irregular crown. A quick scrape of the bark with a pocket knife will reveal bright orange-yellow inner bark. The leaves are serrated and the veins run parallel to each other towards the tip of the leaf. The stems have a terminal spine, and the arrangement tends towards opposite. The leaves are darker green in color and lighter on the bottom surface of the leaf. This species is also dioecious, which means that there are separate male and female plants. Glossy buckthorn can reach heights of 20 feet, often with multiple trunks from the base. Glossy does not have thorns, and the leaves have a smooth margin and are oval to elliptical in shape, with prominent veins coming straight out from the midrib of the leaf, and can be confused for dogwood leaves. The arrangement tends towards alternate. For both species, the bark is gray to brown with prominent light-colored lenticels, the small horizontal lines you might see on the bark of a cherry tree. Both common and glossy have small inconspicuous flowers at the leaf axils. They have 4 petals and are light yellow in color. They turn to peach-shaped fruit that turn black when ripe in late summer, can remain on the plants into the winter, and the glossy fruits progress from green to red to dark purple-black. For control methods for the buckthorns, in the late spring and summer, you can treat buckthorns in a variety of ways: hand pulling and digging, weed wrenching, and girdling. Try to time your efforts for before the plant goes to seed to reduce the spread. Pulled plants can either be hung in other trees with their roots in the air to dry out, piled above the ground on pallets or rocks, or you can contact your local composting facility to find out if they take invasive plant refuse. This part about the composting facility will be true for all invasive plants, because home composts cannot reach the high enough temperatures to destroy seeds and propagules, whereas the larger facilities can. For chemical treatments, basal bark or cut stump, as shown in the bottom image on the right, is a way to limit the amount of herbicide used and limit the non-target impact of application. Using a dye in the herbicide allows you to know where you've applied. A certified consultant will know proper safety procedures and volumes. The next plant is bush honeysuckles. The native range is Europe and Asia, and there are 3 common invasive Eurasian honeysuckles in Vermont: Amur, Morose, and Tatarian. They are a deciduous shrub brought to North America as an ornamental planting and was used as a planting for wildlife until its invasive nature became apparent. Its habitat is floodplains, forests, wetland margins, fields, forest edges, forests, and disturbed habitat. The threat it poses is that it alters habitats, quickly overtakes a site, and forms dense thickets. Bush honeysuckles have an invasiveness ranking of very high. It is prohibited in Vermont, New York, Massachusetts, and in New Hampshire they prohibit Morrow and Tatarian. The hardiness zone for these plants is 3 to 8. These plants are upright shrubs. Their leaves are oval or egg-shaped, with varying tapered tips by the species, and all have smooth margins. Invasive honeysuckles have a brown or hollow pith, which is one way to distinguish them from our native honeysuckles. For control methods, in the late spring and summer, you can treat honeysuckle in a variety of ways like buckthorn: hand pulling and digging, weed wrenching, and girdling. The next plant is garlic mustard. The native range is Europe and Asia. It is thought to have been introduced as a garden herb in the 19th century. It is an herbaceous biennial, green in color with a garlicky scent. Its habitat is floodplain, forest edges, forests, disturbed habitats. The threat it poses is that it outcompetes native plants, aggressively displaces spring wildflowers, including the toothworts, which the West Virginia white butterfly depend on to complete their life cycle. The plant is eaten by the caterpillars. And they can't complete their life cycle on garlic mustard. The caterpillars can't eat that plant. The plant also leaches out a chemical in the soil that limits the growth of other plants. Garlic mustard has an invasiveness ranking of very high. It's prohibited in Vermont, New York, New Hampshire, and Massachusetts. Its hardiness zones are 4 to 8. This species is an herbaceous biennial, green in color, with an S-shaped taproot. The leaves are heart-shaped and toothed. First-year plants appear in rosettes, and second-year plants form bolts 2 to 3.5 feet tall. The flowering period is throughout the spring with white 4-petal flowers. The fruits are in pods or capsules that are green and turn brown when dry. For control methods in the early spring and summer, you can mechanically dig up or pull up garlic mustard. Because seeds can stay viable in the soil for 7 years, make sure to return each year to pull up rosettes and second-year plants before they go to seed. Make sure to get the S-shaped taproot below the root crown to ensure it won't resprout. The next plant is Japanese barberry. The native range of Japanese barberry is Asia. It is a deciduous shrub, and its habitat is floodplains, fields, forests, forest edges, and disturbed habitats. The threat it poses is from it forming dense thickets, excluding native plants, and because native animals avoid eating this plant, it puts even greater pressure on the native plants, which are preferentially eaten by the wildlife. There is also current research showing connections between barberry and honeysuckle thickets and higher rates of Lyme disease bacteria in tick populations. Japanese barberry has an invasiveness ranking of very high. It's prohibited in Vermont, New York, New Hampshire, and Massachusetts, and its hardiness zones are 4 to 8. Japanese barberry is an herbaceous shrub that is shade tolerant and can change the soil chemistry, and can tolerate severe conditions like drought and harsh winters. The leaves are oval or spatula-shaped, with smooth margins, and clustered in tight bunches near the branches. The flowering period is late spring, in clusters of 2 to 4 along the stem. Fruits are bright red, mature in late summer and fall, and can stay on the plant through the winter. For control methods in the late spring and summer, you can treat barberry in a variety of ways: hand pulling and digging, weed wrenching, and cutting. This plant has fibrous roots that can dive into the soil under rocks and tree roots and resprout if not removed. Just like with buckthorn and honeysuckle, try to time your efforts for before the plant goes to seed to reduce the spread. Pulled plants can either be hung in other trees with their roots in the air to dry out, piled above the ground on pallets or rocks, or you can contact your local composting facility. Basil bark is an option for chemical treatment, and a certified consultant will know proper safety procedures and volumes. If you'd like to learn more, here are some great places to start for information on control and management. And this is a free and easy-to-use resource for anyone looking to start mapping, called Mapping for Healthy Forests Vermont. And anyone with a smart device can take part, and is easy enough to participate you can join today. Check out iNaturalist.org and search for the Mapping for Healthy Forests Vermont project, and log your observations. If you'd like to learn more, practice your ID skills, or learn about control and management, here are great resources for all of the species mentioned today. And if you have any questions, feel free to contact me or visit vtinvasives.org. And the last thing I'll say is that all Vermonters have a stake in the invasive species issue, and we can all make a difference.